if there were a way for you to create tens of thousands of dollars in take-home profit every month, owning a business you can run from anywhere? And what if that business could scale well into six figures a month because there's a huge supply and demand imbalance big players haven't figured out yet? Well, you're about to meet a man who's doing it. He started out as a hardworking but low-paid construction worker and then found his way out. And he'd be the first to tell you if he can do it, so can you. Stay tuned to meet Jamie Robinson. Welcome to the Main Street Capitalist Show. I'm your host, Russell Gray, and I'm on location today in Phoenix, Arizona at the Assisted Living Conference. And I am talking to people that are successful Main Street capitalists, entrepreneurs, and investors. And you're about to meet a gentleman that I've known for a number of years and watched his success and heard his story. And I thought it would be a story that would encourage you out there if you're in the corporate rat race and you're trying to get out, if you are looking to reinvent yourself and have some more upside, take more control over your destiny, build a business around a lifestyle you want to live. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So please welcome Jamie Robinson.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited, Jamie. So I think, because you're not a household name, not yet, let's just talk a little bit about where you're at in life. What are you doing? Talk about your family, talk about your business, talk a little bit about your lifestyle, and we'll kind of reverse engineer how you got from where you were to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife and I, we own several different assisted living homes around Georgia and Ohio and Tennessee. We're expanding this year. We're kind of getting into a real expansion mode in our company. It's been a long time in the making. I've been going through the process for about 10 years. So really kind of hitting that stride. But, a lot of that was driven by our goal for a different lifestyle. I grew up and all my family and friends, they all kind of went the corporate route. They all worked in my case, it was AT&T. So my parents and my brothers and my cousins and everybody went that route. And I was the only one who did not. I was, I guess, the black sheep of the family, right? And so I knew I wanted something different. I didn't want anybody telling me when I was going to go on vacation or telling me where I was going to go on vacation because they controlled my paycheck, which controls, I'm not going to be spending a month in Italy if I don't make enough money to do that, or if the man doesn't give me the time off to go do it. So I was always a terrible employee, for sure. I would never make a good employee for anyone, and that became evident. So I've always been a business owner through construction and a lot of different endeavors. Before that, I was a financial advisor for a while until 2008 happened, and that kind of went out the window. And then I met my lovely wife, Dana. She's an RN by trade. She was an ICU nurse. And we came into this and met Gene Garino, which I know you guys were good friends, and it made a lot of sense to us because we were able to make a bigger impact in the world. We were able to make a big impact in our world because we were able to control it. And so I guess our niche inside of the RAL community is we operate everything remotely. So we live in Alabama, but we have no businesses in Alabama. Live on a beautiful lake out in the middle of nowhere, and I love it. And and when we're not there, we're normally traveling around the country in our RV because that's a big part. I wanted to homeschool our kids, give them a really great experience, kind of expose them to what the world can be. I grew up in a very small town, a very limited view of what the world could be. I got to see a very small area of rural Alabama, and so I wanted them to have a different experience than I had. Dana grew up, her dad was a physician in the Air Force, so she saw a lot of the world when she was young, and so she kind of had that experience. And her dad was also an entrepreneur himself. So she kind of grew up in that entrepreneurial family. I knew nothing of that growing up. And so I really wanted to expose my kids to that. And I wanted to have the quality time that my parents never got to have with me. I watched them get up before the sun came up, and they came home way after it went down. And they never came to any of my game, or they would come when they could, whenever their boss would let them off. To come see me or my brother's games or anything like that. And I just wanted to provide a different experience for them. So I think that was the big motivating factor for us. And this business allowed us to do that. So especially now with technology, and it's growing, and it's grown, and it's growing to this day, as we all know. With AI, I'm equally excited about it and terrified with AI, right? So I think it's going to do some really wonderful things in a lot of our lives, and it's going to be destructive in a lot of ways too. Kind of like the Industrial Revolution or anything, right? Any major changes, there's going to be catastrophe and success that comes out of it. And so I just I wanted to harness that and use it and kind of leverage all the technology to help us meet the personal goals that we had. So,
Yeah. So I'm going
you
to
know,
slow you down a little bit
yeah,
because I wanted to get kind of a framework for where you're at. So you've
cool.
built a successful business and a successful portfolio.
Yeah,
So you got two things operating. So you do work and you earn money, but you also own assets that pay you to own them. And you've parlayed that into a lifestyle that allows you to homeschool your kids, live out in the country where you don't have to be near a place to commute, spend time on the road in your
yeah,
RV. I think you're describing a lifestyle that a lot of people who might be listening to the show who are trapped, I call them cubicle dwellers, right? I remember my very first job, I had to punch a time clock and I lasted 10 months and I hated it. And then I went into outside sales. I started a business, and my mentor told me when I was very young, 19 years old, he goes, Russ, once you go outside, in other words, once you have freedom of time, you can never go back.
yeah,
And I, like you, made a very bad employee. And I walked away from my corporate sales job when the people I was working with began to try to take control of my time. I said, I need to have upside potential. I was willing to live on commission, and I liked that. But what I didn't like was somebody telling me that I had to come in and do a cold calling campaign or show up at whatever event they thought was important, maybe that I
yeah.
didn't think was important. So let's go back a little bit because I want to make sure you threw a little bit of jargon in there. You talked about assisted living and then you used an acronym RAL. There's people out there who have no idea what you're talking about. So just describe a little bit about the business you're in, assisted living, and then what an RAL is.
Absolutely, yeah. So an RAL is just simply it's a residential assisted living. So most people are pretty familiar with nursing homes. So when I first came into this, I just thought it was all nursing homes, and I think that's a common sentiment amongst the population. We're just until you have to know about it, you normally don't. So RAL is residential assisted living. We sort of specialize in memory care, so people have dementia, Alzheimer's, things of that nature, and we do it in a very like high-end boutique type setting. So just imagine a home with 12 to 16 older people that suffer with a lot of these cognitive deficits, dementias of different kinds, but in a very nice home setting with a private chef, all the care that they need. So we just basically provide that for them. That's what it is.
So it's an actual home. I just want to
Yes.
make sure because a lot of times you look at these facilities
Yeah.
that are for elder care and they look like hospitals
Yeah.
or institutions, but this is more of a home environment. So you take a single family home, big single family home, retrofit it, and then it's really you're running a business. So maybe let's just take a little bit of a journey. We're going to do a more in-depth thing. I'm much more interested in your story, but I want people to understand like the actual vehicle by which you provide for yourself primarily.
For sure.
And so you own several of these at this point. You're doing more, and you gave a great presentation yesterday to talk about something that I've always talked about, which is repositioning equity in property A to be a down payment on property B, and then create equity growth in those properties and reposition 2 to become 4, 4 to become 8. I call it breeding equity. You can do it in any type of real estate, but this one's particularly interesting because of the cash flow. So you're giving a great experience to the residents. So maybe talk a little bit about the difference between maybe when we think about what you guys call a big box versus the experience that the customer has in these smaller facilities. And then on the other side of it, as an operator slash owner, the types of cash flows that you're able to create with this kind of investment.
So one thing about me is I guess I learned from a very early age from my granddad. He was this old country fella, and he always told me, he said, any deal you ever get in your life, it's got to be a win-win situation. And if anybody's getting the short end of the stick, then the whole thing is going to lose at some point. And so I always approach everything with that mentality. And so going through some personal experience with my own family and my grandmother, I didn't know about the difference between REL and big box or any of that. And I watched her go into a place that we felt like we were going to be winning, or she would be winning in her situation in life. But we came to realize pretty quickly that the only people winning were on the other side of the table. So the big box that got all of our money every month, they were making a tremendous amount of money, but unfortunately, she was not getting what she needed on a very personal and care level. And if you think about it, we live our lives and very few people are going to live in hotels or resorts for their entire life. And so you take that person who's lived in a 3-bedroom house for 80 years and then add some confusion in there with dementia or Alzheimer's. So they're already in a pretty uncomfortable place. And then you take that person out of their comfortable home and you put them into this resort setting. So me or you, we're in this beautiful hotel right now and it's wonderful, but I'll be glad to put my head on my pillow in a few nights, right? So you're always kind of glad to go home after that vacation. Well, just imagine if it never ended. That vacation can quickly, descend into a nightmare. And that's what happens for a lot of people. And I get it, being in their home is not always it's not always appropriate place for them. Like in her case, she had multiple levels, so that would not work out for her. And so we
In
needed
her own home.
In her own home.
So she needed to
yes.
vacate her own home.
She needed to leave her home.
And go someplace into a new home.
Correct.
That she was sharing with other residents. So you kind of like have a new family, and then you got 24/7 care.
Yes. Well, where she went originally, and where she ended up meeting her demise was with about 200 other family members, right? And it was very confusing. So going through that experience back in around 2012, I came to the realization that we can do much better, because in this situation, everyone's not winning. And I knew that the deal was just structured badly from the beginning. This is a societal problem, I believe. And so Dana and I sought out to create a better experience. And that's when I met Gene Carino, and we ended up doing what we do now. So the stark contrast is they get to come to an actual home. We normally take a home, it can be the location is most important, but they're normally anywhere from 7 to around 12,000 square feet. So given very large home, but still very home-like. There's still the chef is working in a regular kitchen. They can smell the food cooking. They have their same friends that they can hang out and have breakfast and lunch and dinner with. The things that when we think about family and home, the building is just sticks and bricks. The home part in your the way it feels to you, or the people that you're enjoying it with. And so that's what we really sought out to create, and that's what we've done.
So that's the customer experience now. If you're the child, which is usually the decision maker, an adult child's got an aging parent, I need some place to put my mom or my dad where they're going to be taken care of because they're too much for me. Assisted living means he needs help with the daily activities.
Yeah.
And then there's different levels. You kind of threw in, I think at one point you mentioned memory care. Maybe talk a little bit about the different levels, and then I want to come back and talk about being on the investor operator side. But there's assisted living, and then that is maybe the foundation. I had my dad in independent living for a while, and then when they need help, they go into assisted living, and that's where there's 24/7 people helping them with their daily functions.
Sure.
The way I understand it. Okay. But it goes up from there. It gets harder after that.
It does.
What are the different levels?
So the hierarchy of what is called long-term care. That's the term for that. So there's independent living, like your dad is in. So that's just kind of like you're staying somewhere where you don't have to cut the grass or those kind of things. And then there's assisted living. So maybe just need help with a few activities of daily living, preparing food, things of that nature, maybe some physical care. One step above that, and it's almost kind of a sidestep and up, is memory care. So a lot of these people are physically good. They can get up and walk and talk. We call them walkie-talkie, right? But they have a hard time with just direction of like when to start, when to stop, those kind of things. So that's what we refer to as memory care. And then now there is a step above that, which I don't venture into that realm, but that's skilled nursing care. So that's the nursing home. It used to be when you were a kid, it was the home. Like there used to be there wasn't assisted living. There wasn't any of these other things. It was, you were at home until you could no longer be taken care of at home. And then you went to the home, right? You went to the nursing home, and they were largely state funded, run, really dismal places. So, back in the late 70s, early 80s is when assisted living even started. And that's opened up.
Coincidentally, when it started taking 2 full-time workers to support a single household, and there's a whole economic story behind this transition, but capitalism, entrepreneurism solves a problem, right? All of a sudden, these people can't take care of these aging parents because they both have to go to work, and somebody needs to look after them. And so now, just like daycare got created, this is kind of like adult daycare, and then
that's another one. Adult daycare. That's one that's
they come home at night, but they get help during the day.
It's kind of one step before assisted living normally. Yeah, but it solves a lot of.
So you're in the assisted living and memory care space. That's your sweet spot.
That's correct.
Okay, so let's talk about being an owner operator, and then I'm going to go back to the beginning of your journey and like how did you actually learn how to do all this. So we'll come back to that, but right now let's just talk about what is it like for you. We talked about your lifestyle, but maybe just the highlights of the financials, what it takes to really do one of these things? I know you coach people on how to do this as part of
I do.
how you build your own business. But talk a little bit about what life is like on the ownership side of it and the owner operator side of it. And if you own one of these, do you have to work in the home? Are you taking care of old people?
Absolutely. So, our experience has changed a lot over time. As you're growing in business, it's, at first you're bootstrapping it, and you're getting it off the ground. You're making those sacrifices that anybody listening to your show that's any kind of a business owner, I don't care what kind of business owner it is, you're gonna make some sacrifices, especially in that first couple of years. So, our experience is sort of transition from being that owner operator. We were always remote. It just included a lot more travel at that time. And we also had, 3 small children during this process. So that definitely complicates things. But, we've gone from being there, boots on the ground. I've had to go in and change 80-year-old ladies' undergarments in the middle of the night and early on, I had to do those things. But actually, I was honored to do those things. I look back on it, and it's a very humbling experience to kind of go through that. But I think that is over time, you either get stuck in that and you end up being what they refer to in like a mom and pop, right? Where you're just you're the guy ordering the groceries and cooking the food and doing everything. And it's very easy for people to get stuck in that realm because it's hard to build anything when you're so deep in the weeds that you can't pop out and see the future. But we realized that we did not want to stay in that place. And we knew we needed to grow or we were going to die. Like that was you come a moment where it's not sustainable to do that. And it's really not doing the business a justice, because if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and I'm doing all the jobs and something happens to me or my wife, then all of these people are left without the care that they absolutely need.
Yeah.
So it's really not doing them a service by you being the hinge point for everything. So,
Jamie, I just want to interject. Such an interesting concept. I say all the time, it's easier to be big than it is to be small. And one of the challenges I have, I teach people how to raise money in this space. It's one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm going to be speaking on that this afternoon. And I really am trying to stretch their thinking because people are used to being hands-on and whatever they do. Solopreneur. This is not a solopreneur type business. It's actually easier to go bigger, be able to have a full staff, have management teams in place. It's like the difference between owning a rental property and self-managing and owning an apartment building that's so big that you've got to have a full-time staff handling everything. So you've evolved from being more hands-on to the point where you're much more hands-off, right?
Absolutely. Through leveraging technology, again, VAs, I swear by having a VA. Also, just hierarchy of leadership. I think that your leadership abilities get much more stress. There's a lot more pressure on your leadership ability. Being able to lead people in the right direction, create the right culture where everyone understands the vision of where we're going and has an ownership buy-in. So I want everybody on our teams to have a true feeling of ownership in it, where they have a sense of pride in what they're doing. They're doing it for more than a paycheck. They're doing it for the mission, the purpose that we're out there doing it. So I think that establishing that was really important. And then, so it's my job now as the operator has transitioned from doing the things to supporting the people to do it. I work for them essentially, basically giving them the tools that they need to be successful, giving them the right culture and the people around them to always push, drive towards a positive culture, I think is really important. But it's given us the ability on the other end to where now we can continue to scale and grow. And I completely agree with you. When you're first starting out or being small is the hardest part of all of it. And it's a constant drain that can really kind of suck the life out of you over time. And we know a lot of business owners, no matter what industry it is, they're super excited, they're jacked, they're out there getting started. And then, man, give it 4 or 5 years and they look like they aged. You watch the presidencies, right? And
they go from owning the business to the business owning them.
Yes.
And there's a transition you have to go through as a business person from being a founder, which is a buzzword right now. I'm an older guy. And, we used to just call it being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But today everybody calls it being a founder. Which is great. But it's easy to found things.
Yeah.
Very difficult to build things.
Yeah.
And so when you go from being a founder to being a builder, and you go from being someone who's providing a service to leading a team, you talked a little bit, and I was going to talk about John Maxwell's servant leadership. But when you really are building and empowering people to do a job and do it well, and your business model rewards them and you for all that happening, becoming the person who's capable of doing that becomes the job, not doing the work of what the business does. And that's a mental shift that I think a lot of people that I've worked with sometimes struggle with. And I think when you've made the transition, I'm going to ask you the question and you look back, it's kind of like, boy, I wish I would have understood that from the beginning. So let's talk a little bit about, before we go there, and I want to go there, let's just talk a little bit about the financials. Like you buy one of these homes, how much do they cost? How much money do people have to start one? How much money can they make? Just ballpark. I mean, because, you have good visibility. You're very, very involved in the industry. And so you have people out there. Because I think when people think of owning a single family home, the kind of money that comes out of these things, people have a hard time really understanding. How is that even possible?
Yeah.
So tell me, what is it like? What are you experiencing?
The opportunity out there, I guess, and there again, I'm fortunate, and it's become a real passion of mine, and Dana, my wife, as well, of being able to coach and mentor people all over the country. And I've been for many years doing that with Gene, and then after his passing, of being able to continue on the legacy of doing that. And one thing that I've really learned is, well, for one, it's hard to put an exact number on that, because it's going to be very different in Mississippi than it is Southern California, right? So, but essentially, you're taking a single family home. If I had to pick one right in the middle, you're probably going to be around $1 million, million to 1.5 into an overall project. But if I'm telling somebody from South Mississippi $1.5 million is way different than telling someone in California that, right? So, but nationally, I would say somewhere around the $1.5 million range. You're taking normally a single family home, converting it over, and then creating a real cash producing and income producing asset. Like I used to do single family rentals and flips and stuff like that. And so when I first saw this model, and I could go from making $400 or $500 a month and dealing with the same, you're still dealing with the maintenance of a home. And I could, turn that into 10 or 20, or some of ours are $30,000 a month income type properties. It kind of turned the lights on for me. It was a big shift. And I was also given the ability to make a big difference in their life. I think that if the impact is not important to you, then there's a lot of ways to make money out there, right? I mean, you have people making money in all different ways, in all different kinds of businesses, but I wanted to find something where I could make a long-lasting impact on a lot of people's lives. So those things all kind of combined together, I think, is why we went this direction. But the overall, for the person who's never looked at this, they might have ventured into some single family rental. It's sort of the same thing. The location is much more paramount in this case, because it's got to be somewhere that's very convenient for families, and that, you could go on into that. But I think that finding the right location, you're basically building it out to make it appropriate for the use that you're implementing. But absolutely, most of them, the kind of minimum for us in the REL world is they need to make at least $10,000 a month. That's cash flow. So that's
before everything. Tax cash flow. So yes. That's after you've paid all the operating expenses. It's after you've paid the mortgage. Yes. The only thing you haven't paid is the tax. Is that
correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So $10,000 a month.
Yeah.
Right. Which would be 1.2 or $120,000 a year.
Yeah.
On an asset that's maybe $1.5 million.
One that's only 10,000. It would be sub 1 million. That's sort of the entry level for me.
Okay.
So most of them, like for ours, they're normally all in somewhere around 1.8 to $2 million, and they're going to average anywhere from $22,000 to $30,000 a month before taxes.
Well,
so
in regular real estate, they have the 1% rule, which has been a little bit elusive as of late. But back in the day, you'd go out there and you'd look for the 1% rule, right? Yeah. If I could buy a $120,000 house and it would rent for $1,200 a month, but that's gross rent.
Yeah.
That's not net. Here we're talking about before tax cash flow, after the mortgage and everything in 5 figures.
Yeah, everything.
And so I think when people hear that for the very first time, it literally sounds too good to be true. And yet I know, because we were in the opening ceremony or the award ceremony yesterday, and Isabel mentioned that the RAL Academy has produced over 150, opened 150 homes through their students already. Mm-hmm. In the 10 years that I've known them. And of course, we know the market's way, way bigger than that, part of the reason why this thing is continuing to explode. The demographic wave hasn't even hit. So if you haven't looked at residential assisted living, it's probably something you want to take a look at. But okay, so there's a lot of opportunity. There's still a lot of upside. There's still a lot of work to be done. Gives you this great lifestyle. You've kind of figured it out. Now let's go back. Let's go back to before you discovered it. And I think a lot of people can relate to, hey, I was out there flipping houses. I was maybe keeping a few and holding them for long-term production of income. I had a day job or whatever. So starting from kind of that baseline, talk about how you first discovered this space and how you kind of went from where you were to where you are, and walk us through that journey. And then when we get to the end, I'm going to ask you to go back and say, knowing what you know now, how would you have coached yourself up going through that very same experience?
That's interesting. Yeah. So yes, going all the way back, again, my wife, she was an ICU nurse, so she had that medical background. Her dad's a neurologist. Her brothers are all nurses and doctors and stuff. So she had that background. Mine was very different. I was in construction and then real estate. That was sort of my background. I think it's important to clarify that this is not as much of a real estate play as it is a pure business play. So when you're looking at the numbers, right? So if you're looking at a single family rental, your biggest number is your debt service and then, the maintenance and things like that. Where with this, my debt service is a much smaller number than is the operating side. So,
but to be clear, there are people who only own the real estate.
Correct.
And then lease it to the operators. So even plugging into the community,
correct,
because it's a lot of capital to take down the real estate.
It is.
And the same reason that everyday businesses out there on Main Street rent their real estate is because they make more money by keeping their capital invested in the business than they do investing in the real estate. But if you are a real estate investor, you're not inclined to operate an assisted living home.
Correct.
You can align with a tenant, essentially, who is operating that business.
Correct.
And the cash flows on that are better too, for the same reason. You can be triple net, the way I understand it.
Yeah.
And because it's a business, it really depends upon the location. The landlord's got a little bit of leverage on the tenant because they can't just move if they want to. Their whole business is set up there. So there's some commercial advantages, even though you're owning a single family home.
Yes.
Okay, so your wife is coming from the caring profession, and you're in the real estate and construction profession, and you're doing whatever you're doing in the real estate side. But somewhere along the line, you were exposed to this. How did that happen?
Yeah, and I remember that day. It was you remember your children being born. It was like one of those kind of days, So I remember this was back in 2016, and we were very active in our RIA, so the Real Estate Investment Group there in Birmingham, Alabama. And we went down, and it was for the normal meeting, and we met Gene Garino. He did his little hour-long talk, and it made a lot of sense to us. It really made a lot of sense to her because she knew the demand, because she saw it every day, and my lights went off of $10,000 on one house. We'd be lucky to make that on a flip at the time. We were flipping houses right before Than Merrill and all of these started, flip this house, came on HGTV, and everybody and their brother started doing it and screwed the market up for us. But I think that when we saw that, the lights went off. And I remember we were driving home. We're about an hour from Birmingham. Like I said, we live out in the middle of nowhere. And so we're driving home, and she's over there on her phone. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, well, I'm booking our flights to Arizona. And I'm like, what? I was like, what? Don't we need to talk about this? And I remember she's like, are you stupid or something? Did you not just see what I saw? Like, we're doing this, Well, that if you're married or have a partner, it's like, oh, we're doing this, right? So we get home, and sure enough, went out to Phoenix and learned how to do the business. Went through the 3-day boot camp that they put on there at the RAL Academy, and basically we had made a decision. And it was kind of coincided with I was having my first son, right? So that's kind of for me, was an emotional time of, man, it's not about me anymore. It's about this new human coming into the world, and it makes you go through a mind shift. So I think that sometimes things fall into place when they're supposed to. It's a timing thing. But so we go out there, and I remember we left. And that Sunday before we left that hotel, I said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it all the way. We're not going to just dip our toe in or something. I'd seen too many people try different things. I think a lot of people, they never really go for it.
Yeah.
And so we returned home. I sold my company within a matter of weeks. She put in her notice that day to the hospital. When we got home, she put in her 30-day notice, and we burnt the ships, as they say.
They're
right?
action takers.
We absolutely jumped in,
Total
baby on the
commitment.
way.
Yeah.
It was our mantra around our house was we're going to be successful at this or we're going to die in the pursuit of it. That's just that's how we kind of attack everything. And so since that day, there's a lot of ups and downs. Obviously, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have triumphs. You're going to have successes and failures. I've definitely learned a lot about learning from those failures. I don't fear failure as much anymore after making quite a few, because after all of my failures have come the biggest triumphs and have come the biggest breakthroughs for me.
Yes.
And I think that's the only way to earn true wisdom. I don't think you can learn true wisdom. I think you have to earn it. And we
But you can compress time frames on how fast you learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the time you get knocked down till the time you get the lesson and get back up, right?
Learn it
You
fast.
compress those time frames. That's the secret. That's why you want to be part of a community of people that are working on solving the same problems and cheering for you.
Yeah.
When you run into the difficult times, instead of mocking you and telling you, I told you were crazy to do that.
Yes. I think that being in the right tribe around the right people that understand what you're trying to accomplish. I came from a very much worker mindset of, everybody that I knew were just workers at a company. And it was, I don't know, I was kind of frowned upon to do anything outside of that, to break that mold. So it was, for me, it was very important to have that community around you that's like, man, that sucks, but we're going to pick up the torch and keep going, you know? So yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think that you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang out with. And I can tell you the 5 people that I hang out with the most now are very different than the 5 people that I were hanging out with then. They're probably mostly, where they were then. It would be the best case scenario for them. A lot of them not so fortunate. So that's, I think that's really true. Anybody who's listening to this and you need to just take a look around. You look at your last 2 weeks and who did you spend the time with? Who are you talking to? Where's that input coming from? Are you around people like Russ Gray and the other people in this community that are always filling you with positivity and you're just moving forward, making the world a better place? Or are you with people that sit around and bitch and complain all the time about woe is me and I'm held back by whatever outside force? That's just the language of the loser is what that is. So I identify those people pretty quickly and I cut them out like a cancer. And I think that it sounds pretty harsh, but if you don't want to be in there with them, you got to cut them out quickly for sure.
So you sold your company. She quit her job.
Right.
At this point, you don't own any.
No.
So let's talk about that first one.
Mm-hmm.
Because not everything works the first time. I have a good friend, a very successful investor, but the very first apartment deal he invested in, he lost $1 million. Right. So, and there's, Thomas Edison famously tried, 10,000 filaments before he found the one that made the light bulb work. And I think that any entrepreneur is going to suffer, maybe in some cases, catastrophic failure. I know I've had a couple, but if you're passionate about what you do, if you believe that you can get the lesson and you want to go back and try again, the old adage, you're never defeated until you quit. But what was that first one like? How did you find the deal? How did you put it together? How did it turn out?
As much as I would like to sit here and tell you that our first one was a home run and everything was just
and
awesome.
I had no advanced knowledge, but I just thought, well, that could be the case, right? Because that's often the case.
Yeah.
And I think it's a testament to your character and your commitment that you didn't give up. But I'd like to talk. This is about being real. I'm not here to blow smoke up anybody's anything, right? I'm just here to get you to understand. If you want to be a Main Street capitalist, if you're going to be a Main Street entrepreneur investor, you want to take back your power. You want to take back your potential. You want to develop it. And you want to do something meaningful. You might take a few lumps. But there's a whole tribe of us out there that are going to be working with you, that are cheering for you. That's why I started the show.
Yeah.
Because I want people. I've had so many great conversations as I've watched your career develop. And I thought, you know what? I got to get this on tape. I got to capture this. I got to share this with people. So walk us through. You've sold the business. You got some money. You've got your wife who is on board with you, which I think is super important. And maybe you guys had times when you weren't completely on board. I don't know, so there's that too. But how did you find your first deal, and just walk us through with that whole experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that my experience is just proof of what you're saying. Luckily, mine wasn't $1 million, which we wouldn't have had $1 million to do that. I didn't make a ton of money. It was a very small construction company. I basically sold it to a couple of my employees. It was for a very small sum of money. So was not like we walked into it with a bunch of money. We actually had a lot of debt. We were early 30s and so we did not start out with a bunch of cash at all. So we had to get really creative over the time. But so we'd come to the class. We had learned a lot of of how to do it. And our very first deal that we closed was not our first deal. So we had another one that was actually in Birmingham, Alabama. And, I did the demographics. I knew what the nicest neighborhood in that area was. And I learned a very valuable lesson through this, which will kind of wrap up here at the end of how I came to this lesson. I came from a background, I've done a lot of construction. My wife's a nurse. I'm thinking, hey, we got it. I'm not going to reach out to the REL Academy for mentorship until we start operating, because I felt like we had done all the things that lead up to that. And so we get into it, and I get into this deal. We're about 50 grand into it. So 25 grand for earnest money, which had gone hard, and another 25 for architectural renderings. Get deep into it, and we had to rezone this particular property. And we show up, and the street that I had chosen just so happened that 3 attorneys lived on this street, and they all took it upon themselves to pro bono the case for the community
To stop
and they
you.
pro bonoed me. All right, they absolutely they came out with the pitchforks and the torches, as they say. Right, so we get there, and it was 200 angry people and these attorneys and me, and it didn't turn out so well for me. Learned a lot that day. I remember Dana crying in the bathroom of the courthouse, and I mean, it was on her birthday of all days. That's why it's always just scarred in my mind.
Wow.
And I remember I got home that next morning, and we'd spent probably 4 or 5 months working on this deal, lots of hours, lots of time. And so I called one of the mentors at the academy, and I told him what had happened, and gave him the whole gory story of how it went down. And I was actually. I said, oh, well, you may not remember us from the class. I did real estate. My wife's a nurse. We've done yada, 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 trying to make myself feel better, I guess. And I'll never forget, it was Jim Garino. And he says, well, how's that working out for you? Because I had not done one mentorship call with them because I thought I had it. I got it. I'm a real estate guy,
Okay, let's fast forward. Going back, knowing what you know now.
Yes.
How would you have done that?
So one thing I learned through that is I learned to humble myself really quickly. I learned to be a good student first, right? There are people who have done it before that are successful doing it, and they're more than happy to help you do it if you will just open yourself up and lower your pride enough to take the help, right? And so since that day,
But you weren't then.
I was not there. Absolutely not. No, I had a huge chip
So
on my
lesson
shoulder.
number one.
Yeah, lesson number 1, you don't know what you don't know. And in the things you do know, you probably still don't. So I humbled myself. We both did. Dana and I learned a lot through that process. And since that day, we moved on and we followed a process that had been proven to work over and over and didn't try to recreate the wheel. So we found another deal. It was actually about 4 hours away from our house. They wanted, I remember it was $1.2 million for this thing. It was a 13-bed memory care home over in Georgia. And so through the Academy's help, we were able to negotiate this thing down to $750,000. It's a long story how all that happened, but we got into it with pretty tremendous equity right from the beginning. Now the seller got what they needed out of it. I knew how much they owed, and they were trying to retire, and the business needed a lot of help. Like it was not a turnkey deal at all. So we went in, made a lot of changes, and after about 2 years, that's what the talk I gave yesterday was on cross-collateralizing and leveraging equity to go into future projects. That's what we did there. But it came back and it was worth like 1.6 million. So we had built over $1 million worth of equity in this property in the first year. It took about a year to do that by fixing those systems, but then we were able to kind of catapult or leverage that into place number 2 and 3, and so that's sort of the beginning stages of where that started out.
Well, I know that you have a meeting coming up. And so as much as I'd like to continue this, it's going to have to be maybe in a follow-up episode.
I love it. Yeah.
Just if you can quickly talk a little bit about what you're doing today. You've mentioned the RAL Academy. They're the promoters of this event, the Assisted Living Conference.
Right.
You've mentioned Gene Garino a couple of times. I met Gene and started when I was co-hosting the Real Estate Guys show and began promoting this because I just thought this was amazing.
Yeah.
But you actually work with them today in addition to owning and operating your own stuff. So just quickly describe what it's like now being on the other side of those coaching calls.
It's really interesting to work with entrepreneurs all over the country. It's one thing that sometimes they usually don't know it, but I probably learn more from them than they learn from me. Sometimes it feels that way because they come into it with a lot of wisdom on their own. I work with people that have been very successful in different areas. But this is kind of the area that I've chosen to really to grow in. And so we're able to help each other out a lot. I really love that dynamic. So I think that today my real passion is kind of twofold. One of almost philanthropic side of me is I'm able to help people absolutely change their lives. So here at this convention that we're in, these halls are filled full of people that I had a conversation with a lady this morning that she was sitting there, and I remember her 3-day class, and I was helping Jean to teach part of the class, and she was sitting there and just crying. She had taken a massive hit back in 2008, her and her husband, and she really was like, I can't fail at this because we've got to do something big. We don't have 30 years to build another nest egg. And, from going from that conversation, from her very lowest point, they had a really rough go at it. To now, I just ran into her in the hall a while ago, and they have a beautiful 24 bed that's full with a waiting list. They're going on to their second and third. They never made more money in their life, but never made more impact in their life.
Wow.
Like she's walking around with a passion
Yeah.
of just glowing. She doesn't loathe going to doing her business. She's so exciting because now I'm able to help her to leverage into those bigger ones and to scale their portfolio. So for me, that's part of my life is doing that. And Dana as well. It's absolutely, we have plenty to do with our kids and our own businesses, but we absolutely dedicate time to our students every single week to make sure that they're on track and they're meeting their goals. So that's a big push for us. And on the other side of it is really scaling. You come to a point when you hit, you hit, I guess, success. And then for me, it becomes much more. And then there's like legacy, I guess. I want to build something that's much bigger than it's going to supersede us when we pass on. And then, so I think that's really where our focus is now is being able to build that to make a generational change, to change the way that our families will experience life in generations going forward in such a hectic, crazy time that we're living in. There's so much uncertainty right now. I like to really focus on the things that I can change and do the best I can to adapt as fast as we can to the things that we can't control.
Yeah.
So that's really where our focus is now, is doing that, supporting the REL Academy. I think that what they do is it's really it's God's work in a lot of ways. As a lot of these people are able to find a place where they can find that tribe. I didn't have that tribe when I first came here, and now that I do, and this is 8 years ago or 9 years ago, that I found Gene and this tribe, and it just felt like home to me.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for it. And to get to meet people like you and Mona and everybody else, which I consider family at this point. It's been an honor for sure.
Well, Jamie, I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. I know you need to run to get to a meeting. If you run into that gal, send her over here because I want to interview her. And folks, if you're interested in learning more about the residential assisted living space, we have some information for you. It's free. Just send an email to ral@mainstreetcapitalist.com and we'll get that to you, tell you about the RAL Academy, some information about how the industry works. I think that it has a lot of promise, and I think Jamie did a great job explaining, honestly, what it's like, right? All the ups and downs with all the lumps, right? Would you do it all over again?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, knowing what I know now, I'd make a few different choices, but I don't regret any of it.
Just do it bigger, better, faster.
Bigger, better, faster. Get bigger, die. That's what I say.
All right, buddy. Well, I appreciate you being here with us today. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you on the next show.